It's no secret that most elements of Skyblock come down to an aspect of RNG. I mean, who wouldn't want to drop a Divan's Alloy? Or a Warden Heart? A Judgment Core? Maybe one of many random dies. Honestly, the list is pretty much endless. Even if the thing that you're trying to get isn't massively difficult to obtain, sometimes it can elude you. And it's all down to the mystery of RNG. You spin that wheel and hope for the best. Now, within Skyblock we have stats such as Magic Find, or Pet Luck, that could perhaps increase our chances of dropping RNGs. But the whole point of an RNG drop is completely relying on luck. As somebody with max Magic Find could potentially fill the meter for revs to get a Warden Heart 3 times in a row, and at the same time it's possible for someone with minus 5 million Magic Find to drop 3 Warden Hearts from 3 consecutive bosses. But here's the thing, every single drop that you can get from Slayers has an RNG meter. The RNG meter selects a certain amount of XP for an item that seems reasonable for when it actually drops. And if you fill this meter with XP and you don't get lucky in the meantime by dropping it, then you automatically get one. This means that if you are one ridiculously unlucky person, then you're still going to be able to obtain a drop and not 100% rely on luck. An almost identical system was implemented into Dungeons last year, and it seems to be the best system of RNG. And this system that we see in Slayers was transferred over to Dungeons last year. Now, Dungeons used to have a different system for RNG meter filling, whereby if you had your meter selected and you dropped an item before you actually filled the meter, you would still keep all of your stored XP, so you could then actually drop the meter drop. Now, when you get close to meter, this increases your chances of dropping an item, which actually led to a pretty drastic decrease in the price of Necron sandals, so the Slayers RNG system probably is for the best. But at least Dungeons actually had an RNG system. There's other items in the game where you could pretty much, in theory, pump an endless amount of money into something and not really be able to complain if you never dropped the item that you're looking for. And honestly, I think that's a bit of a problem. So before we go any further, if you are planning on purchasing anything from the Hypixel store, make sure to use code NITROS, it gets yourself 5% off. Also, you should subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you watch the videos and you haven't subscribed, make sure you do so. And you should also join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of this video. We offer Slayers and Dungeon carries, so if you need carries or want to carry and make some coins, make sure to join. How about something like dragons? For the majority of people who aren't Iron Man, the main focus of doing dragons is to drop an Ender Dragon pet. An epic Ender Dragon can bring you 450 million coins, and a true legendary around about 800 million. But as with pretty much every other pet from the game that is dropped via RNG, there's simply no RNG meter, and the chance you have to drop these pets are not really that common. You have to think that these chances that are displayed right here are per dragon, and obviously every dragon may take, what, a few minutes? So yeah. And of course, some people do just genuinely have really bad RNG for certain items, and of course that is completely all down to luck. There's many people who would have done one dragon and dropped in a dragon pet, but on the other end of the spectrum, I know someone who has spent over 4 billion coins across 2 or 3 different profiles on dragons and only ever dropped one pet after they spent 4 billion coins. Don't know about you, but an epic Ender Dragon for 4 billion coins, yeah. And there's probably people who've spent more than that as well and not got a pet. There are definitely items in the game that I think would definitely not benefit from an RNG meter, and to be honest, would actually make dropping the item probably worse. Even though some dies in honest truth are ridiculously too rare to drop, for the most part I think they're almost a little bit mystical to a point where you don't ever expect, like 99% of people don't grind a certain thing to drop a die. People who drop a die because they're doing something else at the same time, and it just kind of happens. And I think that's exactly how it should be. If they introduced a meter for something like die, you would have people who would then be specifically grinding just to drop a die, which is, I don't know, I don't think that's how it really should be, but I know some people still do it just to see how long it will take to drop a certain item. Likewise, I think it would be a little bit pointless and silly if they introduced a meter for something like Lapis armor from Lapis zombies. It's just not necessary. How about a meter for something like Alloy? Now, the Divan's Alloy is pretty unique. As the longer it's been since the last Alloy drop, server-wide, your chances actually become a little bit better to drop it. After an alloy is dropped, the chances of dropping an alloy is 1 in 800,000, which is not exactly great chances at all. Every 3 Skyblock days or 1 IRL hour, the global drop chance is multiplied by 10, and settles at 1 in 8,000, which is obviously considerably better than 1 in 800,000. But that's still 8 or 9 times more rare to drop than a Necron's handle. Of course, if you're efficient doing nucleus runs, then it doesn't take anywhere near as long to do a nucleus run than it does to do a floor 7. But if you compare good floor 7 times, run times that is, to good crystal nucleus run times, then realistically, it's still more rare. To be honest, I think it's actually quite surprising that there isn't an RNG meter for alloy. I really am. Now, there are a few things that would have to be worked out. First of all, when we look at the overview of said RNG meters, Slayer RNG meters are filled using stored Slayer XP. So what that means, for instance, if you were to kill a tier 5 rev, obviously you gain 1500 Slayer XP, so 1500 XP would be added onto the meter that you've already accumulated. The increase in the meter also coincides with the increase in drop chances. As for dungeons, RNG meters are filled using stored dungeon score, which increases at the end of each S or S+. Catacombs run based on the player's score. That means that S only grants you 70% of the score. Now, for every nucleus run that you do, you receive 800 Heart of the Mountain XP. So an RNG meter could be very easily implemented if they just simply made it so your RNG meter increases with Heart of the Mountain XP, and worked it out so that 800 Heart of the Mountain XP would be equal to one run, and line that up with the drop chances. Now, dragons may be a little bit more complicated. There's a lot more calculations and so on that goes into, I guess, dropping a pet. First of all, your chances slightly differ depending on the dragon. You've also got to consider how many eyes you place. You've obviously got to factor in your magic find and your pet luck. But per dragon kill, other than getting, of course, some combat XP, you don't really get anything else that's specific to dragons in terms of XP. Obviously, you get +1 on the bestiary, and I don't understand why they couldn't just potentially make it so they set a number for the meter, and every time you kill a dragon it goes up by 1. That would be the most logical explanation. And for people on classic profiles, you might just be thinking, well, if they can't drop an item, they can just buy it. It's not the end of the day, and that's 100% true. Although it can be said that dropping an item yourself, number 1, is obviously going to make you some coins, and number 2 is different to simply buying an item. But for those people who have literally no other option other than to grind the game for a specific item, i.e. if you were playing on Iron Man, then of course you don't just have the option just to buy an item if you just really get ridiculously unlucky and just can't drop it. On top of that, the resources are of course harder to source as well. Now, you may say this is self-inflicted because they chose to play on Iron Man, and I guess you can't really argue with that. But at the same time, with items like this where they have no RNG meter, I guess it just makes it that little bit sweeter when you do drop it, or if you do drop it. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think we should have an RNG meter for relatively rare RNGs that we don't have at the moment? Of course, RNG meter is only implemented for Slayers and Dungeons. Should it be maybe implemented into other things? Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you do leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.
Walk 2500 on my shirt with the